Welcome back, everyone, to... need to lower the volume quite a bit. To a TNO leak thing. And this time we're taking a look at the updated Russia. Yeah, just very quickly glancing over what's different and, how things have shaped up. Now, there's a bunch, as you can see, of new portraits. Some of them are just the same people looking a little bit, different. Some are cooler and older, such as fucking Andrei Vlasov over there. As you can see, he's a big baller dude now. But yeah, Tuashevsky looks a lot cooler now. Some of them are the same, and most of them just received the new descriptions. Some have new flags, such as fucking awesome Zlatoust, which has an AK-47 with Izhmash. I think that's how you. I think it's the name of the this logo. It's the name of it's the logo of a factory, which, if I recall correctly, is called like Izhmash or something. But yeah, it's basically like one of the biggest arms factories in Russia. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Anyway, so let's get right into it. They organized everything in a sort of clockwise pattern, which is kind of weird. We're just gonna go left to right, clockwise, but just know it's kind of weird. Like, for example, they put Vasilyevsky with Svobodny Organ, which is in Mongolia up here, but whatever. So first one is Gorky. Pretty much nothing has changed in that. Basically, yeah, Gorky, Hitler Caves, Nikolai Stepanovich Avierin from Gorky, black-hearted, sun-eyed, gun in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic ambitions and a gigantic mirth to overwhelm Nazi garrisons of Moscovian under the treads of his chain. So basically, they added the description. He fought, in the West Russian War or whatever, which is when, the West Russian Revolutionary Front almost took over Moscovian Reichskommissariat, and now he's just a raider, essentially. The only thing Avierin cares about now is to crush the Germans, see them driven before him, and hear the lamentations of the women. But yeah, basically he's maintaining his tanks by raiding the Germans and doing all that stuff. Then there's Onega up here with a new leader, Vladimir Kirpichnikov. Was nothing more than an ordinary commander in the Red Army. Many thought he was destined to die as a hero of the Soviet Union, bravely fighting against the enemy, but that was not to be his fate. Kirpichnikov would lead the 43rd Rifle Division into battle against the Finns in the Karelian Isthmus. The superior enemy tactics would cause the Soviet front to collapse, and the 43rd Division was almost destroyed. Kirpichnikov was captured during the chaotic retreat and would be interrogated and captured by the Finnish army, blah blah blah. Finland was protected from some of the chaos in Russia by the Wehrmacht, but once the Revolutionary Front stormed the AA line, Finland was in danger. Now, they could not simply trust the Reich to protect the frontier. To solve this problem, the Finns gathered the Volunteer Anti-Communist Guard, a force composed of the Russians in their territories and led by none other than Kirpichnikov himself. So he's basically kind of the Finnish Vlasov. And if you recall, when I made the video about the Russian warlords, this is basically what I guessed Onega was gonna be anyway. So yeah, no surprises there. Should Kirpichnikov's guard liberate Arkhangelsk from the hold of the communists, the Russians of Karelia might finally be free once again. So maybe he can take over this and then try to, because Finland has a bunch of territories to the east of real-life Finland. They're basically Greater Finland, and a bunch of these territories are obviously mostly Russian-inhabited, Karelia and Murmansk. And yeah, he can harbor apparently ambitions over that. Then there's Andreas Meyer, which is the Aryan Brotherhood. Obviously, they're pretty much the same as they used to be. There's a lot of really big brain things like oh no, he was taught the superiority of the socialist nations, but then the Germans were stronger. But like, what makes the German Aryans and what makes that better than the Slavs? Jesus Christ. Meyer, or Medvedev, as his Russian name was, found his answer in Russian history. Peter the Great had once traveled around Europe and then forced the people of Russia to abandon their backwards ways and embrace a more civilized culture. Perhaps this is what the Germans were meant by making Russia Aryan. It was not a mere physical race, but a higher state of mind. Now, as big brain as it is, Peter the Great really did like want to sort of drag Russia kicking and screaming into a sort of superior culture that it was not its own. In fact, a lot of like hardcore Russian nationalists don't really like Peter the Great because of that. Like, basically Peter the Great imported a bunch of German, not only culture, but also people to, run the Russian state. And, like, for example, also prohibited people from having beards, like long beards, because that signified, like, religious devotion. But, like, in the West, people shaved and didn't follow religion as closely, and so they were more open-minded. So he was like, we need to do that, like, often this is considered a sort of example of, like, a sort of kind of weird enlightened despotism, because as a whole, Peter the Great's reforms did modernize Russia. One of the results was the fact that Russia was able to get a port on the Baltic Sea, thus connecting itself to wider European trade, once again, which had been sort of neglected since the days that when Moscow took Novgorod and sort of shut down, the Baltic trade, essentially. And that went fully under control of Germans and Swedes. But yeah, like, for example, another thing that was a consequence of Peter the Great's sort of westernization obsession is the fact that, like, for quite a while after Peter the Great, the Russian court was basically just not really Russian in culture. Like, the imperial court spoke French or German for a long time. Yeah, and, well, for example, the other really, really important, like, Russian ruler of the 18th century was Catherine the Great, who wasn't even an ethnic Russian. So, yeah. Then we have Bashkiria. Now, Bashkiria is quite a bit farther away now, is it? Yeah, it's down here in Ufa. Now, they're led by a guy called Ekhmetseki Velidi Tugan, or Tugan. Reflective of the Bashkir history in the 20th century, the formation of identity in the youth, the upheaval of the days of the Russian Civil War. Descendant of Muslim clergy, became an accomplished Turkologist scholar. Now, the Bashkirs, as the flag may make you realize, and as the weird name, and as the Turkology aspect may make you realize, is a Turkic ethnicity. Yeah, they're one of the many, like, sort of ethnic groups of Russia. They have their capital in Ufa, but actually, they could probably want to move a bit further west. Now they've actually removed Kazan, and now there is a Tatarstan in Kazan, which is the thing that I thought weird, Kazan not being Tatar, but whatever. If you remember, in the older Russia, Kazan was a Red Army warlord. Anyway, of course, the music wants to be really, really loud. Anyway, Bashkir nationalism, independent Bashkir Republic was proclaimed. In the chaos of the West Russian War, few people expected that Velidi will ever become a relevant person in the chaotic Bashkir politics, if the younger generation could ever remember his name. how wrong they were. The journey from Turkey to the middle of the conflict-ridden Russia was not an easy task. His contributions were acknowledged in his motherland, and he found no problem to rise as the great Bashkir national leader. Okay, so that's what they have. Then there's obviously Vlasov and Samara. That's the same as it used to be. Now, Vlasov has a really cool new portrait because, you know, he aged. Yeah, and I think that the description is, like, mostly the same. Yeah, it looks like it's mostly the same. Even though it was Vlasov who helped beat back the Soviets, obtaining his own domain in Samara in the aftermath, the Germans still saw him as little more than a dog to be kept on a short chain and closely watched. Humiliated by his masters and unpopular among his once trustworthy officers, who started to view his servile demeanor as an obstacle to liberating Russia, Vlasov remains a weak and isolated figure who can only hope that reclaiming Russia will absolve his miserable title of a loathsome traitor. So, perhaps he can get couped, but yeah, that's basically them. And in case you do not know what that is, or what this faction is, it's basically just anti-communist Russians who are collaborating with the Germans, at least partially. Then there's Tatarstan, which is in Kazan, which is Western Russia's third city after Petersburg and Moscow. And yeah, basically the Tatars are just an ethnicity, another Turkic ethnicity. He was always a Tatar first, he blah blah blah. Tatar Autonomous SSR may have escaped the worst of the war, but thousands of his men were still sent off to never return. More importantly, they got their first taste of real freedom since the abortive Idel-Ural state of 1920, which is something that I did talk about in the Russian Warlords video. If you want to go check it out, there's timestamps for it. And once they had it, they were not eager to give it up. When the West Russian Revolutionary Front demanded sovereignty, the Tatars only accepted in exchange for significant autonomy and exemption from Russian laws. They had a tense but peaceful coexistence with the front until the West Russian War, when the Russians tried to extend the Red Army draft to the Tatars. The thought of having to spill Tatar blood in a Russian war once again was too much for them to bear, Alish included, and Alish Abdullah is the leader. The Tatar people took up arms, fighting for the freedom that they were long denied. Blah blah blah. When the Soviet army under General Pyotr Gavrilov, who was if I recall correctly, the leader of Kazan earlier on, gave way and retreated further north, people heaped laurels upon Alish and proposed that he be elected mayor of Kazan. Blah blah, president of Tatarstan, ratified the Tatar constitution, and yeah, okay, so maybe like in exchange of like, again, heavy autonomy, they could, you know, peacefully join with one of the Russian factions, but their main goal is like keeping independence. I'm not sure if they would want to try to reform the Idel-Ural state, which also included the Bashkirs and southern Uralic ethnicities, you know, ethnic minorities. So just generally this area. I'm not sure if you're looking at the cursor. Idel-Ural is also in the glorious mod known as Thousand Week Reich. So yeah, I wonder if they can try to reform the Idel-Ural in any way, shape, or form, but that would be cool. Then there's Ivanov, Vologda, and they were the like neutral guys. And yeah, he used to be West Russian Revolutionary Front too. However, the momentum would not last. Betrayal and internal power struggles weakened the front, and the Germans and their collaborators were soon able to reverse the tide. Having already liberated and occupied his native home of Vologda, or yeah, Vologda, it's just written wrong, Ivanov made the hard decision to abandon his cause, and his army seceded from the front and declared neutrality. To him, continued involvement in the rapidly disintegrating front would simply have brought more bloodshed to a region that had already seen so much. This move won Ivanov the praise of the people of Vologda, viewing him as both the liberator of their city from Nazi tyranny and the bulwark who keeps the chaos from other warlords at bay. His position has also been reluctantly accepted by both the Front and Reichskommissariat, who recognize the usefulness of a buffer state existing between them. Yeah, basically, basically, you know, he's neutral. Then there's Kostroma, Bolshakov. Basically now, Vologda is this big thing. Kostroma or Kostroma is just a very, very minor little thing below him, and they're probably basically a semi-puppet of Vologda. At least it looked like it. And yeah, again, on the periphery of his territories was the city of Kostroma, which was too far from his provisional capital to administer directly, but too important to leave to its own devices. Unsurprisingly, you know, man tapped as its governor. City as a wait point for Russian refugees seeking to flee Moscovian. So they're basically doing a bit of a railroad kind of thing, underground railroad. Limited trade between other city-states and Moscovian's industry, something that left a bitter taste in many people's mouths, but few complained about the stability and prosperity it brought. Yeah, okay, that's basically it. So nothing's changed. Then there's the free West Russian, or sorry, no, that's Sverdlovsk. There's a bunch of Red Army people. So Sverdlovsk is Rokossovsky. Basically north of Tyumen, just east of the Urals, and they're a breakaway from. There we are. They're a breakaway from the West Siberian People's Republic, which again, just everything east of the Urals for a bit up to Omsk, basically up to Omsk and Tomsk, all the way to the Urals, which is where, you know, this orange Zlatoust thing is. And it's Tyumen right now. Tyumen is under Lazar Kaganovich, who's the guy that wants to find Stalin. So nothing has changed. Rokossovsky was there around at the same time. Yeah, basically he's still doing, you know, just his old Red Army stuff. Rokossovsky has not abandoned his cause of the Soviet Union's reunification, even if it will be driven out or driven by its loyal and impartial military. Born and taught in the best traditions of the Russian and Soviet art of war and the working people above the bureaucrats. Yeah, basically, you know, just more pro-military. Just like Ukhta and Plessetsk, which is where Tukhachevsky now is. It used to be called something else, I don't exactly remember. Kotlas, I think. But yeah, basically, Zhukov, Georgy, Mikhail Tukhachevsky, and Kliment Voroshilov are all the West Russian Revolutionary Front, and they have not changed. In case you do not remember, basically, Zhukov wants to reunify Russia with sort of a little bit more diplomacy and flexibility in like political department. And yeah, again, he's more reformist. Tukhachevsky is more militarist, a lot more militarist, and Voroshilov is gonna die because he's old, and he can be replaced by either, you know, Tukhachevsky and Zhukov or another candidate that would try to, you know, balance out the other two. Then there's Vorkuta, the greatest Gulag place. And Vorkuta used to be under the Red Navy, but they're not in the Red Navy anymore. They're just a Navy, I think. No, just basically they're just the Gulag state. Yeah, he was a Cheka member. The Cheka was the predecessor to the NKVD, which was the predecessor to the KGB, the KGB. So they were just secret police. As chief of the Vorkutlag, the Vorkuta Gulag, a large Gulag complex, he would exercise his power initially as the face of the West Russian authority. In reality, he did whatever he wanted to, so basically it's just his own, like, you know, it's his own Gulag kingdom. And, you know, all he wants is to survive, essentially. Then there's the empire with, you know, the empire is in Vyatka, and basically they changed the portrait. The war came to an end, but Vladimir could not yet go home. The Germans were afraid that, much like Vlasov, he would prove too popular and end up undermining their rule. Basically, again, he's collaborating with the Germans. When the Germans were fucking up he went rogue, essentially. And then he didn't really manage to do too much. Then there's Kazembek, which, okay, so Vyatka, also showing you geography. Vyatka's over here. Bierezniki to the east is Kazembek, and they're the Mladarossi, which you probably remember, the weird sort of proto-Nazbols. Yeah, his fascination, if not to say sympathy with the Soviet system. He claimed that the Russian people digested the Bolshevik brutality and overcame it from the inside, with the Soviet government, for all its flaws, becoming a true representative of the national interests. Most expected was his stance against the Nazi invaders to the Soviet Union, although his reputation among the immigrant circles faded and he had to leave for the United States. A faithful and loyal monarchist, Kazembek accompanied Emperor Vladimir III in his war against the Russian Revolutionary Front. After the war, he became the crown's representative in Bierezniki, managing the daily affairs of the reclaimed Tsarist province and organizing industrial work for the needs of the empire. Now, in the old lore, he used to be an advisor that had fallen from grace and was now trying to sort of basically kill Vladimir to make Vladimir love him. That's the, oversimplifying it. But now it seems like he can just, work behind the shadows. Then there's Derlowanger and the Ural League, which are basically the same as they used to be. And Orenburg, or Arienburg as well. Magnitogorsk, pretty much, the same. Tumen, I believe, is still the same. I think he still wants to find Stalin. And Zlatoust also hasn't changed. Zlatoust is basically, if you do not remember, a sort of merchant arms dealer state. Dragunov has no delusions of grandeur about reuniting the Union or sacking Germania. He certainly wouldn't mind those, but he's more preoccupied with profit than anything else. Zlatoust became an island of prosperity and stability in a sea of chaos thanks to its arms trade. Yeah, and he intends to keep it that way. There are few people that he would refuse to sell to, and he's always eager to find more customers, and the business is expected to be booming. So basically, he's controlling a stretch of the central Urals, and makes guns and sells them to all the warlords. Then there's a new name for one of these states, Yugra. It used to be called Khanty-Mansi, but it's still got the same leader, Jaba Yoseliani. And he's this weird-ass Georgian bandit, and it's just an insane story. I really recommend you go read it. But basically, he's just kind of... He used to be that he had broken free from Vorkuta. I think maybe he still has done that. Yeah, it seems like he's still broken free from the prison camps. And he's now a buffer against the remnants of the West Russians in exchange for arms and weapons. So he's... some are whispering about complacence and laziness for his lack of ambition for conquest. So apparently someone can try to be insane there and try to take over everything. Then it goes... See, now we go over here, and then it just... Going clockwise, it goes into Far Eastern warlords, so we're going to go back to the west. This Vasilyevsky Svobodny Organ is just Mongolia, so not that much. Then there is the order over here, Gayinsky, and they're the Order of St. George, or Gayini. They're the Order of St. George, just west of the Ural Mountains. When duty and the draft call, he ended up in the infantry as a machine gunner, fighting mostly on the Ukrainian front. He was a rather prolific soldier, even being considered for Hero of the Soviet Union award at one point. And yeah, like all these guys were heroes of the Soviet Union, essentially all these warlords. After After wandering through the wilderness for over a month, Antipin came upon the town of Gaini, where a local priest took him in and nursed him back to health. In the meantime, Antipin had something of a religious awakening, realizing that all these terrible tragedies that shook Russia, the incompetence of the Tsars, the Germans, the October Revolution, the tyranny of the Soviets, the famines, the Germans once more, were not happenstance, but punishments. The people of Russia had forsaken the Lord, so he brought retribution upon them for their sins. He rallied men from Gaini and the surrounding villages to the Gaini district beneath the banner of what they called the Order of St. George, promising to impale the dragon of atheism upon the lance of truth. Yeah, obviously. Grandmaster Mikhail only kneels before God and refuses to suborn the order to any mortal ruler. But if he discovers a leader who he finds to be sufficiently pious, he will gladly pledge himself and his men to its cause. I wonder who that could be. Like, maybe it would be the Tsar? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe someone that comes out of Komi. Maybe Boris Pasternak, who is in Tomsk, which is the big green thing. They're, as I already talked about, a republic that's relatively unstable and they don't really know what they're doing. Then there's the Free Aviators, which are, again, the Night Witches. They're just protecting the skies, you know, against the German bombers. Then Komi is, you know, a flawed democracy, essentially. As a result of the endless power plays between the front and the hardline communist bureaucrats in Syktyvkar, the now president of the Komi, Cesar Vozniesinski, remained the sole figurehead in the republic who could boast about the public support. Remaining bitter about the incompetence and pettiness of the Soviet higher-ups that nearly brought Komi to destruction, he reshaped the political system of the republic into a representative democracy, where the voice of every man and woman can be heard and will be heard, breaking with a single-party dictatorship. Although the hard efforts of Vozniesinski brought daily bread and a sense of confidence for the average Komi citizen, the reputation of Syktyvkar brought many unsavory people to the city who seek nothing but to eliminate the democracy of Komi through her own institutions. Cringe. But challenges to Vozniesinski came not only from extremists, but also from his fellow democratic politicians who questioned the capability of Vozniesinski to maintain the Republican values. However, despite the political pressure, Vozniesinski is not a person who wants to abandon the system he envisioned without a fight. Now, Komi, which is this thing, can do a bunch of insane things if it's still the same. And yeah. Then there's Omsk, the Black League, who again are just the people that want to kill the Germans. That's basically their objective in life. He has turned Omsk into a state designed for a truly total war, one which will pay staggering prices for the cause of victory. Fucking lovely. Yeah, basically, you know, Omsk, which is this black spot in the middle of Siberia, just wants to see Germany burn to any price possible. Anyway, then there's Novosibirsk, which used to be led by the Old Believers. It's not anymore. It's the Siberian Falcon. Basically, The two men and their subordinates would seize Novosibirsk swiftly, organizing a new government, a government free from any influence and truly sovereign amidst all the chaos that unfolded in Russia. Now ruling for an alliance with Barnaul, which is... Oh, it's another person, most likely, because I have no idea. Oh, Barnaul, the mayor of Barnaul, which must be a city or something. Even though it boasts a large population, industry, and functional agriculture, Novosibirsk still has problems it needs to face, both internal and external, blah, blah, blah. So basically just, regionalist, provincial person. Then there's obviously glorious Rurik II, who, yeah, he's still basically Rurik, and Kemerovo. Obviously the place where he is has been switched around a little bit because it was in the wrong place. Then there's still Krasnoyarsk. Now, Krasnoyarsk used to not really have any lore with it, but like now what happens is, okay, so Novosibirsk, Krasnoyarsk, Kemerovo, all the Siberian Black Army, all these places used to be part of like the Far Eastern Soviet state under Yagoda, which is Irkutsk, and then they all broke away. And as Yagoda began to lose his grip on power and his regional governors began breaking away, the clique reunited in Krasnoyarsk and declared allegiance to the newly founded Central Siberian Republic, which proves to be a rather short-lived union. In order to convince the people of the city that they were not just another flavor of junta and satisfy the government heads in Tomsk, Andreev and his officers have promised men and sweeping reforms: free trade, private property, American aid, open elections, democracy, liberty for all. After the restoration of order and a temporary restructuring process, of course. So they went full, we're gonna give you shit, but first. With the collapse of the Central Siberian Republic, the clique is considering that the right time to take the matter of the Russian unification is in their hands. Following that, it will be a mad dash to the sea, and with it trade with America before consolidating and preparing a path to liberate all of Russia. Yeah, I don't know, like, basically, just a random military junta, Fucking amazing. That's exactly what you would want to see. A completely militaristic Russia. Then there is the Siberian Soviet and the Siberian Black Army, which used to be the Khakasian or whatever, or the Khakasian Soviet, much smaller than what it is right now. So I'm guessing it's going to be much more powerful than what it used to be. And yeah, it's basically still the same though. It's a Makhnovist. It's a sort of anarchist communist, ANCOM, commune thing. I wonder if they can, unify up with Orenburg at some point, or with the other libertarian socialist faction, which is Buryatia. Anyway, basically the Siberian Soviet is made up of two factions now. The Soviet itself, the anarchist sort of federation and political structure, the communal confederation, and the Siberian Black Army itself, a bit like how the Makhnovist, region in Ukraine, the Free Territory, had the actual leadership itself, but then they also had the Black Army, which was led by Makhno. And apparently the Black Army, the protector of the independence of the Siberian communes, will eventually become the undoing of their own freedoms. I don't know. I wonder if they have... Tachankas. Then there's Yagoda. Yagoda has learned from his failures, feeling that he was betrayed at every turn by both civilian and military officials. He came to believe that they were too corruptible to read the proletarian vanguard. Only the NKVD, the punishing hand of the revolution, was ideologically pure enough to bear the burden of the leadership of the Soviet people. Yeah, so basically, Yagoda over here, the NKVD, it's basically like Russia in Thousand Week Reich. It's just a police state nightmare, hellscape. Then there's Sablin, which is the complete counterpart to that. They're libertarian socialist, they want to institute the real Soviet Union's ideals once again, because everyone in this nightmare-ish land doesn't give an actual shit about any political beliefs, but they do, and they're cool. Yeah, basically, they want to do that. And then there's the new Old Believers, HOI4, which is actually relatively small down here to the east of Novosibirsk. And yeah, they're nested up there in the mountains between Mongolia and Siberia, which is a pretty good place for them. And yeah, I talked pretty extensively about the Old Believers in my Russian Warlords of Siberia video, so check that out. And yeah, basically, apparently he's a president, and they're gonna be trying to balance out the Altaic residents of the area with the Old Believers. Yeah, this actually used to be called Altai in the previous version, and it was a Nazi ethno state of a culture that had like 40,000 people, or like, no, I'm sort of under exaggerating. It actually had like around 1 million people, but still, like, you know, yeah. Anyway, so this HOI4 is cool. Then there's Aldan, which is just random place out of nowhere that broke free from Irkutsk, you know, partisans. He has done a good job of maintaining stability and the rule of law, but has amounted to little else since then. He's a soldier without a cause, leading an army of partisans far from home in a city surrounded by enemies. With no purpose driving him or his men, all that is left for them to do is simply survive. So that's Aldan. I'm guessing that that means that they're going to be relatively, you know, influenceable. Influenceable. I don't know. I don't language. Then there's Pavlov in Yakutsk. Another breakaway from the East or Far East Soviet Republic. Yeah, basically. When Yagoda finally relocated beyond the Urals and was established his provisional capital at Irkutsk, Pavlov was appointed the first secretary of the Yakut Communist Party, with the intent of being his superiors' eyes and ears. But as time went on, he became disillusioned with both Yagoda's cruelty and administrative skills, or lack thereof. When Pavlov got wind of other regional governors' planned revolts, he did his best to obfuscate Yagoda's information networks, quickly dealt with those in Yakutsk he knew to be of staunch Yagoda loyalists, and quietly stopped sending reports and resources to Irkutsk. He successfully rode out the storm and silently watched Yagoda's regime all but completely implode from afar. But ever since achieving independence, Pavlov has been content to stay right where he is, keeping Irkutsk safe and stable rather than risk provoking the wrath of his enemies to the south. I'm guessing that would mean Magadan and Amur and Chita. There's a reason why. Magadan and Amur and Chita are the sort of free Japanese lapdogs, far-right, crazy people. So Chita is under Mikhail II. I'm not sure exactly if it's the same fucking Romanov as they used to have earlier. There's so many fucking Romanov pretenders, I do not know. Oh yeah, right, he was the Australian guy. Right. Yeah, it's the same one. The one who served in the Royal Navy. So Prince Michael settled into a civilian life in Australia, an aeronautical engineer who mostly stayed out of the limelight. Until he got an invitation to Harbin. Now, Harbin is in Manchukuo. It's the capital of Manchukuo, or, well, no, actually, no, it's not. It's the most important city of Manchukuo. The capital of Manchukuo is Xinjiang. However, it's the most important economic center, and it's also the center of the Russian Far Eastern immigration, most of whom were anti-Soviet people. And it was also the home to many fucking weird Japanese intelligence activities and projects to overthrow the USSR, or at least mess with it. Some of whom included monarchist restorations. Some of it was Russian fascists. Some of it was just fucking weird random bandits. Basically you see all three represented. The monarchist and bandit elements are in Chita, and the fascist elements are in Amur and Magadan. Now, Magadan has changed a little bit. It's got a different leader, but both it and Amur are followers of the Russian Fascist Party, although Magadan has split because Mr. Mikhail Matkovsky, who I believe was like some kind of robber of some kind. I don't know. I don't remember. Basically, he's like a bit of a power monger. Now he's in charge of his own domain. Matkovsky seeks to save Russia from her ruin. The means to this end lay across the ocean past the Japanese. America! However, even for an experienced negotiator such as Matkovsky, convincing any foreign power is a difficult task. Yet he will not let mere doubt stop him. So I guess he can try to get friendship with America or something. A bit like, Krasnoyarsk, who wants trade with the USA. And his other friend is Konstantin Radzaevsky, or old friend is Konstantin Radzaevsky. Now he's the rival with the glorious Russian swastika. Basically, his hopes of rapid conquest along the Trans-Siberian Railroad quickly faltered. Now, this guy basically became the leader of the Russian Fascist Party in the interwar years, which was a newly established party out of Russian or Manchurian citizens of Russian ethnicity that had immigrated from Russia. Ethnic Russians, in case you haven't noticed. And they wanted to sort of reinvade the Soviet Union and make it a fascist empire. These people were extremely big brain. So essentially, he's like, okay, the Soviet Union has exploded. It's time to go. And he goes in Amur. And he's like, I'm going to go through the Trans-Siberian Railway and take everything. But the Japanese don't only support him. They also support Chita with a Tsarist restoration. Earlier on, they were allies. Now they're enemies. And the Japanese material began to dry up. So he's just retreated to his provisional capital, waiting for another opportunity to strike. His one-time ally, Mikhail Matkovsky, has set himself up as a rival for party leadership and has seized the port of Magadan. Some of his former White Russian allies are drawn to Mikhail Romanov's restorationists in Chita, and the remnants of the old Soviet order still cling to life nearby. Whether Radzaevsky will have the power to overcome these enemies and restore his dream of one Russia, strong and indivisible, has yet to be answered. Anyway, Mikhail, the Chita guy, has an issue, a very big issue, and that issue is called Ataman Semyonov, which I totally predicted, by the way. Like, if you go back to my fucking Siberian Warlords video, I totally predicted that it would be Ataman Semyonov being around. And, basically, either, Chita, which is the beginning point, essentially, of the Trans-Siberian into Russia itself, basically, it's restorationist another Romanov restorationist government, except he's not as legitimate as the other one, so he gets a bit of a stability penalty, political power penalty. The problem with that state is that there's a very, very high influence of the military element. So, the actual legitimacy of the Tsardom is undermined by the fact that the Tsar is just a figurehead for Semyonov and the military people. Now, who the fuck is Semyonov? He was this Cossack warlord that took over in this area, essentially, during the Russian Civil War, and who tried to... at first, he was allied with Kolchak, then he tried to do his own thing, establishing a sort of Cossack power over here. Now, it's complicated, so let's not get into it. There's Cossacks around here. Yes, it's weird. They're called the Transbaikal Cossacks. And, basically he did what Warlords did his own stuff. Then the Red Army won and pushed him back to Manchuria. He ran into Manchuria, and he's like, guess I'm in Manchuria now. And he became a client of the Japanese. He was already, during the Russian Civil War, a client of the Japanese. They sent him guns and shit. And he spent essentially the rest of his life trying to plot how to be annoying to the Soviets. He never really got the chance, though. And he was shot in 1946 in Port Arthur, because when the Russians invaded Manchukuo, when the Soviets invaded Manchukuo, they found a whole bunch of their old friends, with a lot of quotations, that the Japanese were protecting from the days of the Russian Civil War, and of course, executed a bunch of them, including Radzaevsky and including Ataman Semyonov. So now he's trying to be that. Anyway, that's the new Russian Warlords. It's probably, 46 minutes. I do want to thank you all for watching. It's been running way too long. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.